This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Hello, yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, happenings in the international realm, happenings in the environment, technology, everything that affects our lives in one way or another, everything that we might interact with on a daily or weekly basis through media, whether it be new media, through your cell phones and Facebook, or whether it be through traditional media, through news outlets and what have you. And we take a look at all of these stories from a higher perspective. And so if you've listened before, you know what I mean by a higher perspective. And if this is your first time listening, well, I can best explain what I mean by a higher perspective by giving you, and I guess this has turned out to really be my go-to favorite explanation or example or metaphor, if you will. And it has to do with gaming, virtual reality. So, in virtual reality, you immerse yourself in a world that you basically create. And you create a character which gets involved into this world. Now that character is at once you and not you. Okay, there's the character you that's involved in the virtual reality world, and then there's the big you that's kind of controlling everything, or at least creating everything. In the way that certain games are set up, there are things that you're going to have control over, and there's things that you won't have control over. The character that you choose in the game will have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. These aren't reflective of who you really are, because you don't have the kind of weaknesses that the character in a video game or a virtual reality game would have, because you're not in virtual reality. But in order to make the game fun and challenging, your character has certain strengths and weaknesses. There are certain rules within which the virtual reality world that you're playing your game in is framed in. Now, those rules aren't, real, in the sense that you don't have to live by them once you're outside of the virtual reality world, but they are essential to playing the game, if you will. So if you take that example and think of that as a metaphor for what's going on in our life, in our world, that we are essentially characters in a quote-unquote virtual reality game, a game of our own making and choosing, on a much higher level, by the way. Because when you're in game mode, when you're playing the game as the character, you often forget that there's a bigger you behind you creating all of this. And that's what we do here when we interact with these stories. We take the step back and remember, oh, we are creating all of this. Oh, there's a reason I'm getting involved in all of these things. Oh, this me that's playing this game, these feelings that I'm feeling, these situations that are occurring, as real as they may seem, are not the truth of who and what I really am, of who and what we really are. Because the truth of who and what we really are is oneness, interconnectedness. And note that our interconnectedness is such that in all of the technology that we continue to create and embrace are reflections of this interconnectedness. Everything from the computer, which began to connect us, and then the World Wide Web, which really, if there's anything that's representative of interconnectedness, it's the World Wide Web, the internet. The Native Americans referred to the web of life when they were talking about this interconnectedness, and now we technologically are making it a concrete reality. But anyway, the essence of us, our highest selves, our big selves, think of it in a metaphysical sense, are beyond all of these sorts of limitations and game playing and rules. And by immersing ourselves in them, and then taking that step back and remembering the truth of that, we empower ourselves in so many different ways. We remind ourselves of the truth. And that gives us energy, strength, ability to change whatever we're experiencing in whatever way we want to do so. It's kind of a complicated metaphysical sort of idea, but it's not new by any stretch of the imagination. And so I always say, there's two, if you are a person who finds some of the intense media that we are exposed to daily to be disturbing, and a lot of spiritual, or people who consider themselves to be spiritual seekers and so forth, find that the kinds of news stories that come across, the kinds of information that gets, thrown at us, they find to be, or their experience of it is that it's negative or debilitating or anxiety-provoking, all of those things, and it certainly can be. If you don't have perspective. So I always say there's two ways through that you can approach that situation. You can just disconnect altogether, which is not a bad idea to do from time to time. By the way, I fully support that. But what I'm saying, and what I've been saying, is that unless you're willing to live on a mountaintop somewhere, you can only disconnect for so long. Somehow, some way, you're going to encounter, just in the course of your daily life, as I said, unless you're living on a mountaintop somewhere, you're going to encounter some of this. That's not to say you can't reduce some of it by living in certain areas, if you can afford to do so, or if you can, you have the ability to, or the adventurous spirit to go and seek out places that are sort of off the grid. You can do that. But what happens, if you disconnect, if you try to disconnect, and that's not to say that you can't do it, but you're missing an opportunity, as a matter of fact, to go the opposite way, to actually go into these stories, these ideas, these things that disturbance, overwhelmed, whatever it is that it triggers in you. Go into it. Feel that as much as you can, for as much as you can take, and then remember. Then tell yourself the truth about what's really going on. That this is a creation, that you've chosen this creation in order to experience something, and that you've made this creation with you. You've created this amazing situation with twists and turns and thrills and chills and everything else. And when you think about it that way, think about this thing that you've created. You can begin to say to yourself, I take the energy back from this. I take the energy back from that, whatever you're feeling. And when you do that, you've empowered yourself. And you'll see changes. Now, you don't go in right away trying to change a situation. You go in just to experience it. Just to feel that. And just to remind yourself of the truth of it. So that's what I talk about on this show. We talk about news items. We talk about wellness issues. In the past couple of episodes, I've focused quite a bit on wellness topics, different types of holistic medicine and things like that. Because sometimes we don't always get to the wellness portion of this show. So I want to make sure that we cover those things as well. I see this approach to dealing with the media and our interactions with the media as being a wellness issue. Knowing how to have a perspective on these things that doesn't drive you crazy, that doesn't make you feel like the world is coming to an end. Being able to do that is, I believe, a wellness technique. And so that's why I concentrate on it and include it in spirit and wellness. So one of the issues that we're dealing with, and since we just had the Independence Day celebrations, 4th of July celebrations, we're going to talk about the founding of this country, the founding fathers, and their sense of spirituality, because it's fascinating. And it is representative of actually what we're going on, what we're going through now. On a spiritual level, the sort of revolutionary trend we're on, in many instances, not everybody is, but certainly our sense of what spirituality is, on a grand scale, is changing. So we're going to talk about that, and what some of the founding fathers, including George Washington, what their intent really was in the creation of this country, and the creation of certain emblematic monuments here in the Washington, D.C. area. If you read a book by Dan Brown, sorry, name was about to slip away. Dan Brown, The Lost Key. That book touches on some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But just briefly, I wanted to get to this issue. We've talked about it before on the show, but I don't feel like I've given it enough attention. And it continues to be a topic of discussion on, talk shows, news shows, what have you. This idea of our being